Okay. All right. Okay. I was speaking and the camera was not, the thing was not recording, so I gotta rewind and go back to where we were. Okay. You got the law of definitions. This is one of the laws that we have to apply in order to understand the Bible, because we're not just to read it, we should understand it. It says to study to show thyself approved. So we don't just read the Bible, we study the Bible. We study the words. We do a word study. We look up each and every word that we come across so that we can understand what the words meant when they wrote them or when they spoke them. Not when they wrote them, but when they spoke them. So you have to study the word, study what the word meant during the time that they spoke it. That's called dispensation. Study the root word, study what was happening, the social dynamic, the laws that they had to live under that time, because that makes a big difference on what the word meant when they spoke it. Just like we have slang languages today. Slang languages, they're based on our social dynamic and the laws that we live under. That's why slang changes basically every week. So don't think that they weren't doing the same thing back in those days. So you really need to study the Bible. And the best thing to do is to go all the way back to its original words that were put there. You go back to the Hebrew for the First Testament, go back to the Greek for the Second Testament. And each one of them is a half testament. So if you're only reading one and not the other, all you got is half the testament. You don't have the whole testament. So you can't, if you have read the entire Second Testament, but you haven't read the First Testament, you can't really understand what the words are saying, because the Second Testament is the fulfillment of the First Testament. And if you only have the First Testament, but not the Second Testament, you only have a word that's concealed and you don't have the words that's been revealed, so you can't really understand what that's saying either. Because all of the scripture has to line up perfectly in order for it to be truth. Now, that's called the line of context, the law of context, where the scriptures have to be fit in context with the scriptures that came before, the scriptures that came after, and all the other scriptures in order for it to be true. So let's get back to what I was saying here. Applying the law of definitions to the scripture, you are the salt of the earth. We look at the word salt. I haven't looked up what its Hebrew form is, or what its Greek word was when they what they translated it from. But we know enough as far as knowing what the purpose of salt was back in those days. Remember, salt was a commodity. Salt was something that was used to trade. It was like currency, And salt was mainly used, to preserve meats. Like when they were eating flesh, whatever animals they were allowed to eat. Some were eating animals they weren't allowed to eat too. But when they were eating, in order for that flesh to last longer, they had to find a way to preserve it. And they still do the same thing today, where they cure the meat and they store it inside a sodium solution, a salt solution, that preserves it and helps it to last longer. That comes from what they were doing back in those days, because in those days, there were no refrigerators and there were no freezers. That didn't exist then. That didn't exist until like the late 1800s, so that was long before. So they had to find a way to preserve the meats. So when Yeshua tells the disciples, you are the salt of the earth, what he's saying is you preserve the purpose of the earth. What is the purpose of the earth? The earth, according to Isaiah 45:18, is not meant to be empty. It's meant to be inhabited. Now, there's another scripture that says that the earth he made for man. He gave into the hands, into the children of men. Like the earth was made for man, because man was made from the earth. And man is the crown of God's creation. We're the only creatures on the earth that are made in his image and after his likeness. So that is preserved by the word being preached, or the word being spoken. Now, this is what he told, I forget who it was, but he told them, if they hold their peace, the stones will cry out. Which means, if nobody is praising the Lord, if nobody is speaking the word, the stones, the rocks will cry out. That don't make sense to a lot of people. Like, how can a stone cry? But, you could take a microscope and you could look at a piece of matter, and you'll see, if you get all the way down to its smallest bonds, you'll see molecular structures. And then those molecular structures were built and they came out of things that we could not see. You know, and when they first were formed, they were created in the spirit, spoken by God. That's what it said, the word created everything. So that's what it means when it says, there's a scripture that says, by faith, we understand that things that are visible, things that are seen, were made out of things that do not appear. In other words, by faith, we understand that something came from nothing. I remember there was a movie where the lady said that, you know, she asked God to speak to her, and he showed her a leaf bug. And this was a bug that actually has a leaf on its back, or something that looks like a leaf. And this bug's only method of defense is to disguise himself as a leaf. And she was like, how does something like that come from nothing? I mean, how does man create something like that? A hybrid between a bug and a plant. I don't think I've heard of anybody making that. Oh, and I guess I'll touch upon this since I got on that subject. You know, a while ago, there was a lady, and she came on. I remember somebody posted her video, and then I did a repost, and she was talking about what was happening, the vaccine passport, and oh yeah, you know, there was like they were gonna sell this story to people to get them to think that putting this chip inside their mind is a beautiful idea, and this is how they were going to sell it to them. You know, that just like in The Matrix, if you ever seen the movie The Matrix, you've seen the scene where Trinity is hooked up, the character named Trinity, Carrie Ann Moss, she's hooked up to the Matrix chair, and she's jacked in, but her consciousness is inside the Matrix computer machine world. And they put this program into her to fly a B-2 bomber helicopter. And in 2 or 3 seconds, she learned how to fly a B-2 bomber helicopter. And he said, now this is kind of like how it was going to be sold to people. You know, if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever it is you want to be, you don't have to go to school for 4 years. You don't have to go to school for 8 years. You can learn it in just a couple seconds. Just like that. She goes, let's go. And now she's an engineer. Now she knew how to fly a B-2 bomber. They said they were going to sell it to people like that. But see, there's a cost when you do that. A cost is this, you know, if images and things can be downloaded in your mind, then also memories can be extracted from the mind. You will no longer be you. So in order to put something in your mind, something also will be taken out. That's the essence of who you are. And see, and that's one of the reasons why, since you are no longer you, what will be taken out of you is the ability to make a conscious heart decision of whether or not you want to accept the Lord or reject Him. So that's why it says that anybody that, you know, if they worship the name of the beast and his image and receive the mark, they'll lose any chance of salvation, because they won't even be able to make a conscious choice, their free will choice, because their free will basically be gone. So that's one of the reasons. And, you know, also in that, it was saying that, you know, there's a law that was passed that, any genetically modified DNA was patentable. And therefore, that made them think that modified DNA would support legal slavery. But they really didn't look into that law and look at what it says. That law was talking about things that were created in a lab. That's referring to if somebody makes a new flower, a new plant, or a new fruit. Then what they did was they created something that was genetically modified, and they're the owner of it. See, nobody can patent the natural herbs because they belong to God. Everybody understands that. That's why nobody tries to patent an herb. That's the reason why we have so many drugs that are available right now, because people can patent drugs and they can make money off of drugs. But can't nobody patent an herb. Why? Because it's owned by the Creator. So that should be, it's kind of like went in on that, but you know. So I guess I'll talk to you later, or if I get a chance, if I'm still on here tomorrow, I'll upload tomorrow. But if not, then it probably, well, like I said, it probably will be me, probably won't be me. Only way somebody to probably know is if I sit there and do the video right there in public, in front of people, so they'll see. All right. God bless.